channels 1 and 2, I have them set up so they're essentially the same in terms of EQ and compression. We're rolling off low frequencies at 150 hertz, and that's just so we don't get, really boomy. And a unique feature that I was reading about, if you put EQ in front of compression, and scoop out any certain frequencies or filter out frequencies, the frequencies that are filtered out are not affected by the compressor. So there, in a sense, this is kind of like it leaves the low frequencies of our voices intact, and it tames everything else. And I'm sure that over time, as our environment evolves to reflect, like the whatever it is we're doing, the quality of the production that we're doing at a given point, hopefully that will change. We'll be able to make better judgments about how to process voices and stuff like that. So that gets recorded so that it can be processed later. But then on the output, we're taking the headphone output of the interface and going into a first stage of compression. And then from that, and that's a fairly, I feel like that's a pretty low thing. It's like like 1 point something to 1 compression ratio. So just barely compressing it. Just more like taming it. And, but then after that, it goes into an additional leveling device, which has a first stage compression and then makeup gain. And it's multi-band. So it has 2 bands. So it's kind of a rudimentary multi-band compressor. And then from there, it hits a limiter. So after the multi-band compression, we can juice the volume if we wanted to. I feel like I've made some pretty, I try to be really transparent with a device like that, because when I first got it, it was very easy to destroy the incoming signal, like just mash it down to nothing. And since the goal is to control whatever it is we're doing, our voices, I don't know, it's kind of difficult. That's part of the reason that I was excited to find that audio interface that does all the signal generation and audio analysis, because then we can run a signal through it and actually see what's going on. And I think that's important. Like I had a device that would do that kind of stuff at one point, and I got rid of it foolishly.
You never know what you're going to need in the future.
Well, it's funny. Like, I wasn't using it, and I wanted to do the electronic music stuff more, so I needed to, like, retool and get some synthesizers. So I sold my interface. In hindsight, I shouldn't have, because there's nothing wrong with it. But, hindsight and that kind of shit. So anyways, got this interface on the way that allow us to do some more system testing and calibration to make sure that we're hearing what we're supposed to be hearing at listening positions, and make informed decisions about how we're going to make this stuff. I kind of like the idea of generating a DJ mix using spectral analysis to let me know where the energy is concentrated in the mix, so that I can lead it elsewhere.
I like one of the features that I've noticed with some of these DJ programs is that they'll tell you not only the BPMs of the track, but the key of the track. And that has allowed me to make my mixes a lot more harmonically sound. And I think this is like, for every negative aspect of changing technology, I think there's, at least 10 positive aspects as to why that technology changed. So, I think when you look back at a lot of the mixes before there was this kind of technology that would allow you to analyze a track and tell you the key of the song without even listening to it, you had to put a lot of time into analyzing these songs, and then it makes it a lot more difficult to, I think DJs would put together these track lists of things that they wanted to mix together, and they would be so rigid in it because it took them so long to do it. And I understand that, but now it's like, because there's technology that allows like it offsets the energy and the time that it took to do that, then you can come up with a lot more. Like your mixes now can work harmonically without having to put all that time in. And there's no excuse though, and that's kind of where it's like there's no reason for somebody to be mixing tracks that don't work with each other's keys and not like do it over and over. And
I think that kind of speaks to the concept that, you know, the atonal phase of electronic music is over.
Yeah,
like where we can make this stuff that doesn't have to be such a, you know, sonic bombardment. It can be musical. It can sound good. It can sound really good. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to just be like, whoa.
I think there was an identity crisis within electronic music that, and you know, I guess it depends on how far you want to go back. But you know, let's look at Kraftwerk. Kraftwerk has no qualms about being electronic. They embrace the arpeggiator, they embrace, you know, the modulator and the synthesizer, and they're not trying to sound organic.
That's right.
So this is where, if you look at like the origins of electronic music, not talking about tape looping, if we're talking about synthesizer music and the origins of like electronic music, they were not shy about embracing the electronic sound.
I think the first time I saw Kraftwerk in any form, it was like a Casio keyboard that they sped the BPM up on Waltz. I think it was like Sesame Street or something like that. Like, you know, that's the funny thing about it, is that at a point, I mean, I always thought techno was technology music. And I always thought there was this element of embracing technology within electronic music that I always thought was so oddly, like, you know, it was antithetical that DJs would be like, no, we don't like this new technology. Because I feel like electronic music and the DJ culture itself and the birth of giant sound systems designed for the reproduction of dance music, like, these things are all about embracing technology. And about cultures, music-centric cultures that were embracing newly available technology and hardware and things that would give them, you know, the ability to put on a banging show.
Yeah.
And it's even cheaper now than it ever was.
Absolutely. And I think there was a period where electronic music wanted to desperately sound like it was made by organic instruments or analog instruments. And people became, I don't know if it was listener expectation or studio expectations or whatever, a combination of the two, that pushed the sound into this weird, like, you know, if you go back and listen to a symphony orchestra soundtrack from a lot of these big production movies, like, some of them are synthesizers.
Oh yeah.
And the synthesizers are so good that you can't tell that it's a synthesizer. And again, a lot of these
that speaks to the quality of the library and the way that it was produced.
Absolutely.
And the quality of the musicians that have been hired to produce
absolutely.
that stuff.
And you know, those things, they went to such lengths to make those libraries able to fool the average listener's ear, or even the adept listener's ear, that now I think we've come full circle to a point where electronic music is, they went to the abstract. Like, you have these Amon Tobins who were trying to sample atonal sounds, like, you know,
yeah, they're bringing out like harmonics that are only present when you hit a pan with a certain type of wooden mallet, you know, 50 yards
with
away.
rice, and it has to have a rice, like, dried rice in it, not wet rice.
Yeah, it's like it's cooked onto the surface.
Not dried beans either. It has to be dried rice. And there's like a specific frequency that Iman Tobin can get from hitting that pan.
Yeah.
And he made his songs with those types of unique sounds. And
but when he processed it with all that reverb and delay, and then whatever filtering that he put onto it, with whatever processing he ends up putting onto it, it ends up being this like incredible experimental noise that someone else is going to sample and turn into techno.
Right.
And then the techno is going to make sense because they're just going to drive it into you like, this is the sound. It's for like, 3 minutes. And you forget that it sounds like some dude hitting a pan with a mallet that has dry rice in it.
And then at the same time, when he did the Foley Room album, I think to me that did represent kind of this like, this is a defining moment in electronic music where we've gone so far to the atonal that now it's going to go back to the tonal, but now we've also gone past the organic. So it's like now we're moving back to tonal electronic identity. And whether it's in trap music, whether it's in grime, you could look at all these different emerging genres in the last 10 years or 15, whatever you want to look at. It's a lot more embracing electronic sounds, but it's not atonal in a lot of the context. And not to say that atonal music or atonal creation is gone.
What's interesting is that I think that guys like Trent Reznor actually made it safe to make electronic music that was tonal with really abrasive noises.
Absolutely.
Like I actually would put money down that if you took the MIDI or control voltage file or whatever, however they program their synthesizers, Nine Inch Nails does, like if you took that information and plugged it into a sampler playing a piano, I bet it would sound immaculate. I bet their stuff is like beautiful on a piano. I have this really weird like feeling that like they've got some special sauce on the piano. They just dial it in later because there's like this incredible amount of intelligence that goes into that music.
Yeah.
But they do it with the most, aggressive synthesizer noises. And not just like, not like drum and bass aggressive where you can tell they process the living crap out of it. And not just that, but like put reverb on it, then compress the living crap out of it, and then process that, and then sample that and plug that back into a synthesizer so they could like trigger it with a drum machine. Like not like that, but like an actual just raw, brutal synthesizer. They do incredible things. Mm-hmm. I've always really been fascinated and just like in awe of what the Nine Inch Nails team does, simply because they make this, incredible sounding music. I'm not always interested in the depression and the whining. Like I could actually do with less of that.
Yeah.
But the way they program those synthesizers, it's not the kind of production sensibilities that you find in happy electronic music.
No.
But the thing is, it's not always. Sometimes there's this really profound juxtaposition of content. Sometimes it's actually a really happy song lyrically, and it has this really mean sound because it's Nine Inch Nails, or they're doing a Nine Inch Nails version of another song that isn't even aggressive at all, but it's Nine Inch Nails, and it sounds like incredible.
I think Trent Reznor has brought a lot to expression, because if you look at some of his tracks that he's done with other people, like one of the ones that comes to mind immediately is Flyantology with LP, and it's like he stepped completely out of his realm of genre into hip-hop, but he brought his sound into it, and it made it wasn't forced to make it work.
Yeah.
It just worked immediately because he is able to
I saw
express
LP at Bonnaroo
himself.
once.
Like, I can only imagine that was
It was
amazing.
incredible.
Yeah.
The stage show was.
Did they have the robot?
Let's see. The DJ the DJ booth was sitting on top of what appeared to be a gigantic, and I mean gigantic, ghetto blaster. like Back to the Future size speakers on two sides of the stage, and this DJ was standing up there where the play buttons would have been, and I swear he was like touching them, they would like light up. And everyone was dressed up wearing tracksuits and the same like hat, so you couldn't tell who was who. And the dancers were on point, and LP, the show of LP was awesome.
Yeah, he's an entertainer for sure.
Like,
and that's
holy
why
crap.
I've always liked him.
Like, and just the whole thing.
His raps, like he's one of the most complex rap pattern producers, like to the point where when you first hear him, you don't think he's actually creating patterns, but they're so intricate that you have to like listen to his songs 3 or 4 times before you're like, oh shit, there is a pattern in there. I was just too stupid to hear it the first 3 times.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same with A$AP Rock, and I think that's why those guys were, him, Mr. Liff, who else was running? Acrobatic. Man, that whole Definitive Jokes crew back in the day was like, they were some of the most sound defining artists, not just MCs, because again, you have LP making his music, like making his own beats, and then A$AP Rock started making beats. Who else is, like those guys, that Definitive Juke sound, it became so unique to that, like it was future hip hop, but also early 2000s. And now you hear the stuff that LP is making with Killer Mike and Run the Jewels, or as Run the Jewels, and then it's like they're still defining sounds. Like none of their songs sound the same. You go, like, I could name off 5 different songs that have completely different sounds, completely different BPMs, completely different emotional feelings. And I think it's one of these things that LP is, I think he's going to be seen as one of the most prolific artists of our time, in a way that hate him or not, like Kanye is unquestionably one of the most prolific artists in the last 20 years. Just period. Like, you can't, like, when we're talking about expressive art content creation, we're talking about things that evoke emotion.
Oh yeah.
Whether it's hate, whether it's love, whether it's jealousy, whether it's rage, it's meant to evoke emotion. And now tell me someone in the last year who's evoked more emotion than Kanye as an entertainer. You can't. You can't. I think anybody would be disingenuous to say any like in living, because people in their death.
Hold on. I was gonna say, who died last year?
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So this is the thing. Other artists have to die.
Oh man.
To be as impactful as something Kanye might rattle off on Twitter. And this is where
something that Kim might be posting that Kanye's saying.
Right.
And this is
right. What I don't think people want to hate him because they don't have that same impact. I don't even think he realizes the impact he has, because I've been studying him as a force of nature, a force of art, because he went to art school. He was a visual artist originally. He went to art school as a visual artist, transitioned into audio.
Well, I always thought
production.
His music videos were always more interesting to me than his music. Like, I actually feel like the music was secondary to the visual presentation of whatever story he was trying to tell.
And
it's
that
almost
makes
like
complete
music
sense,
backwards, and that's actually the way that I understand the media that he creates.
I believe Michelle Gondry might have made one of his early videos.
I feel like Ray of Light was this thing that was all over MTV at the time.
Yeah, that's like one of the last albums they played on MTV, right?
Yeah, I feel like
Like
that's,
actual albums
Yeah.
of music.
well, that was like
things.
one of the last albums where
Or, I mean,
The
pieces of music.
well, I feel like, yeah, that was like probably at the end of the era of the album where everything was part of one cohesive, experience.
Yeah.
I remember hearing, entire albums by bands like Green Day or Soundgarden where it all seemed to be like one cohesive experience. And
Well, that's the whole point of progressive rock, right? This is like...
we're also, 20, 30, 40 years into progressive rock. So
Right,
that's-
right. In the sense of...
Like Soundgarden to me is way more complex now than it ever was. Like
yeah, no doubt.
like
no doubt.
when I listen to that stuff now, it's incredible. They were doing things. They had managed to shed aspects of rock and roll machismo and move into this place where they could really explore. It was dark. A lot of bands did that. They explored that darkness, and their singers all seemed to pay the price.
Yeah.
I think who's left? The guy from Pearl Jam. He's like the only one left.
Mm-hmm.
Eddie Vedder.
Yeah.
That's his name. He's the only one left from the Seattle sound. I think everyone else is gone.
Yeah.
That's so messed up. And all these bands have replaced their singers. And one of the Stone Temple Pilots was a Southern California band, but they got lumped into the Seattle sound. But even their singer died, and then their replacement singer was the guy from Linkin Park, and he also died.
Jesus, yeah.
Like, I mean, what's wrong? There's something about that kind of music. Like, you have to tap into something extra dark to perform it properly.
Yeah.
It destroys
That's what it
people.
seems like. I mean, it's like obviously hindsight's 2020, but this is kind of where it is. Like, what do we see in these artists that everyone's connecting with? And I think it is this like
What makes them so special?
Right. It's this like extreme insanity that allows them to produce this, like they can get into this mindset that resonates with everyone on that same wavelength. But they're just, it's not that they're stuck in it, but they, I think one of the things that people like talk about empathy and they talk about it in this way of like, oh, I want to be an empath and I want to be able to like feel what emotions other people are feeling. No, the fuck you don't. And because the reason I say that is it's not something you can control if it's real. And in that context, you either feel everything or you feel nothing, because it's like emotions that are other people's, you can't control them. You can't even really control your own emotions. You can only control how you act on them. But if you open up the floodgates of what is thinking about, like, I'm just imagining that you're an empath and feeling other people's feelings. There's like fucking 7 billion people.
I feel like you could attempt to like chemically or electrically attenuate your ability to feel or perceive things, but then you're also essentially nullifying yourself from everything.
Exactly. It's if that was real,
reduce the radius
it
in
would
which
be
you feel things. But,
paralyzing.
well, of course, because then you have to face
the overwhelming.
Well, you have to face just your own emotions at that point, and at that point, oh man.
And again, this is what I'm saying to people who like just. Or the same thing with lucid dreaming. Like, I hear people talk about, oh, I want to lucid dream and I want to take something that makes me lucid dream. No, the fuck you don't. I've been lucid dreaming since I was conscious and sentient. It's one of those things where you can't control where you're at in the dream. So just imagine for a second that you go to work for 8 hours, go home for 2 hours to have your evening, go to sleep, and you're lucid dreaming that you're back at work.
Oh, I've actually had that happen.
Right. So it fucking sucks.
Yeah. Oh, no.
It fucking sucks. It's not fun. It's not, every lucid dream isn't flying around and like,
the weird part about it, I think, is that even if you do recognize that it might be a dream, you might be sitting there like, wait, am I dreaming? There's something about the dream that always pulls you back in. It's like, hey, look at me. I'm actually for real this time.
Yeah.
And it's so engaging because your brain is actually really good at distracting you.
Oh, yeah.
Like,
here, I'll give you a dream that I had the other
this
night.
puddle of chemicals.
Like, this is a real dream. I was laying on an airport conveyor belt, and there was somebody had thrown their bowling ball in the bowling ball bag onto my chest. So I could not yell. I could feel this bowling ball on my chest, and I'm on the conveyor belt about to go back up into the like place where nobody really knows what's back there because we never see it.
Oh, in my mind,
So-
it's a Rube Goldberg
Right,
machine.
exactly. In your mind,
and it sends you all over
so
the place.
I'm like laying on this fucking conveyor belt with the bowling ball on my chest, trying to like. But I know this is a dream at this point because this will never happen. So
Yeah.
I'm like, in my head, I'm like, how do I wake up right now? So like, I basically force myself to do a sit-up, and it's like bursting through a membrane, and that's how I wake up. Like, people, like, you can't know if that's the lucid dream you're gonna have, or
you
if
just like plopped through the gelatinous solution that they have you suspended in for a second, and then they like zatched you, and you like collapsed back into it and reinserted you into the simulation.
that's what it feels like sometimes. Because
That's that whole,
sometimes
like, are you sure you're breathing air moment.
that's because sometimes I wake up and then fall back asleep and then go back into another dream.
And like you sit up and you take that gasp of
Yep.
air, it's like, and then you lay back down, and then next thing you know, you're falling back through something into the dream again.
Or like the falling dream. I fell asleep at a, like, it was like in high school, we were at a football gathering. I was sitting on the couch. We were watching the program. I remember this vividly because this is like when you switch realities, it's jarring and it's not something you forget. And like, I was not by myself and other people were around me in this context. So like, I remember falling through the void, like when you're having that falling dream, like falling where I can't, like, I can feel gravity pulling me down. And then like when I finally like am getting to what I perceive as the bottom, I like smack into my body and jump on the couch like in real life, and everybody around me is like, what the fuck are you doing? And I'm like, I'm freaked out because I was just falling through a void, and now I'm surrounded by people. So this is again where people are like joking, like, or not joking, but they're like, they don't understand what lucid dreams are like, and they're like, oh, I want to take this pill and have lucid dreams. No, you don't. This is like, and I guess in me describing it, it might even make other people want to like try it even more, as if it's like a drug or something. But I guess what I'm trying to express is when people like don't experience something, it's like the grass is greener syndrome. But then when people do experience something, they're trying desperately to be like, hey, this fucking sucks.
You know, it's funny.
This
like,
is not a fun experience.
You're talking about feeling like you're falling and all that. I got a MRI where I was put in the machine, and they put you in that tunnel, and then this machine scans you like a copier. It just goes back and forth, and it presents different magnetic fields so that it can draw information from different perspectives and draw like an accurate model of your body. And so they asked me, what do you want to listen to? And I said, some Miles Davis, and it just happened to be like the Electric Miles, like Bitches Brew stuff. So the really out there, like mind-bending version of Miles Davis. And I'm sitting there and I feel this thing pulling on me. And then next thing I know, I feel like it's lifting. And then the sensation transitions from feeling like I'm being lifted to, I feel like I'm falling. Not just falling, but really fast. Because I can feel this sensation, this magnetic field pulling on my body, like lifting it up. Mm-hmm. But I stopped feeling like I was in a tray or a sled or whatever they fed me into this thing. And then the next thing I know, the thing shifts down towards my legs. and all of a sudden I feel like I'm tumbling, and then I'm tumbling, and then it starts it starts scanning back towards my head, and then the field starts spinning around. So next thing I know, I'm tumbling and I'm rotating as I'm falling. And it was the most surreal. I forgot that I was laying down for a while because it felt like I was falling, but really slowly, like enough that I didn't freak out. Apparently people freak out when it happens. But it was incredible. And, to experience this to this mind-bending, just like acid jazz, it's like, I think this is probably the coolest way to experience an MRI. But I felt like I was falling. And it reminded me of, like, you reminded me of it when you were talking about falling in a dream. I had a very similar experience. I've had a similar experience to that in a dream where I was falling, and I felt like I was being pulled in different directions. And then when you try to, like, fight it, you're pushing through something. It's like water almost. Yeah. Like a really super viscous water.
Yep. And that description, I think a lot of people would understand, because I believe what you're feeling is you are seeing, like, okay, imagine.
Well, I know that part of it is like breaking through the hormone or neurotransmitter-induced cataplectic state that we go into when we start dreaming.
Right. But here's the issue. So when you're dreaming, imagine.
But that's what I just described as not a complete, assessment of the chemical activity that's going on.
But
that's
it's
like,
part of it, because when you're in a dream, you're in a construct that your brain is creating, but that construct also has a version of yourself that you want to identify with as your ego and yourself. So you want to also use your same muscle neuro pathways that fire for moving your muscles, but because that realm does not work in the same space-time continuum as the one you're used to, all of your muscle responses feel exaggerated one way or another. So if you're trying to, like, move, like, say, punch someone, it may feel like you're punching through mud or punching through gel, because what you're trying to fire in your actual neurons,
the buffer in your brain is redirecting it to its dummy load.
Exactly. So it's basically overloading that pathway that can't actually reach to your physical muscles, and it keeps, and you're feeling it being overloaded,
or sometimes
not
it does,
moving.
and you kick a wall, and you're like, wake up, like, freaking out, like, oh, what
exactly. or you actually send enough charge to that pathway that it actually, like, stimulates it to kick, because you keep, like, you're in your dream. Or this is why people probably piss on themselves, and, like, in your dream you go to the bathroom, well, you actually open up that, like, line of neurotransmitters to then release your bladder, because that's what you're thinking about, and you're telling your body to do that.
It's funny, there's a brief period of time between the age of 21 and 23, which is incidentally the years that I drank a lot legally. And I remember having a lot of dreams where I couldn't find the restroom, and I had to wake up and go find the restroom. It was a really interesting, like, reoccurring theme when I had to go.
Yeah, and that's like your body has a built-in mechanism now to be like, hey, this is like countdown to that fucking, if you don't wake up, you're gonna piss yourself.
Yep. Or sometimes I would find a restroom in the dream, but it wouldn't have a toilet or a urinal or a bathtub or a sink even. It was just like a closet that had tile. Yeah. So it was really, really confusing. Like stalls even, but nothing in them.
Yeah. That's
I don't miss dreams like that.
No.
I think that's something that stopped happening when I stopped drinking, actually. And when I think about it, I didn't really drink that long or that much compared to, some of the people I know who go to bars regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I never really did. We had, like, kegger parties ever so often, but I just didn't like getting drunk. I don't like throwing up.
I always enjoyed finding the other people who weren't drinking nearly as much as everyone else.
Yeah.
I think that's how you I think that's how we find our people, is that we find the people who are doing maintaining a similar level of behavior
right
in an environment. Then there was also the whole like we smell our own like concept, where it's just something not right about certain people.
Yeah.
Just stay away from them. You know, I think that's like actually a function of like our immune systems.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like the phrase "you make me sick" is based in reality.
Yeah, absolutely. I
Like-
mean, I know a lot of times, like, I'll smell somebody, like, their essence, and it just grosses me out, and I'm just like, ugh, like, whatever. Because part of it is I've started to figure out there's certain smells that I know what I know they are now. So, like, if somebody doesn't floss, or somebody smokes cigarettes, or if somebody is like a heavy drinker, or somebody eats a lot of deli meats and they don't like do a lot of activity, like those things like seep out of their skin.
Those things add up over time.
Yeah,
too.
absolutely. And it's like or like if people don't like wash certain crevices, like, you know, not necessarily armpits, but like behind your ears or some shit like that. That's like, there's certain funks where you're like, oh, I know this funk. This person has bad teeth. That is like, in a way that's like, oh, this might be fucking contagious.
Oh,
and I
yeah.
think this is where you're like, your body telling you that somebody's making you sick is to get you away from them so you don't get sick too, whether it's from a mindset to be like, oh, if I hang around this person for too long, I might start thinking like this too.
Oh man, yeah, the toxic
Like-
mindset. That, well, you know, it's interesting. I think that there's this kind of, most of the people that I would associate with having some kind of toxic outlook on anything, they often tend to exhibit this kind of gatekeeper-like behavior, like like they're protecting the contents of a sacred cave or something, like a troll.
Yeah.
And it's really weird, because I feel like I try to surround myself with people who push me to explore more ideas, new ideas, and to be open-minded about old ideas, because sometimes things change when we get new data. And I feel like that's an important part of growth and maintaining an environment, fostering an environment where growth is possible. Because that's not easy the older we get.
Yeah.
Because, you know, limiting factors such as space-time and the reality that no matter how fast we travel in a car, we can never really overcome things because it's such a small scale compared to the vastness of time itself, space-time itself. We are but grains of sand on an infinite beach.
Yeah. Which I think it's interesting that on that kind of note, we're starting to look at like micro space travel vehicles as like alternative. Like, it's a lot easier to send something airborne and interstellar that's like small and large.
Yeah. Well, you know, this is kind of interesting. I'm just a fan of science fiction. I love science fiction. I love old science fiction. I love new science fiction. I just think I think the genre, as a genre, science fiction is amazing because it really reflects so many things, you know, our fears, our strengths, our weaknesses, the things that motivate us to succeed. It reflects all these things. And within the best science fiction, of course, there's a human story, which allows us to explore some aspect of humanity, where we realize that humanity will prevail in the presence of, you know, whatever it is. Because, you know, we're optimistic. We like optimism. Without optimism, everything gets really dark, really fucking fast, and it's not. And that kind of science fiction isn't interesting.
No.
But you know, I think that we've got a lot of really good ideas presented in science fiction, and a lot of them end up coming true. And if this, you know, I don't even think I feel like I've barely scraped the surface with a spoon that bends easily. But, like, you know, with what I've read of science fiction literature and seen in film and television and all that stuff. Science fiction gets it right more times than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
It gets it wrong most of the time because there are a lot of short analysis of physics or of chemistry or of just whatever aspect of science that the story has to be told about so that it makes sense to somebody, because it can't all be white papers and academic literature. Sometimes it has to be like Outer Limits.
Yeah.
But when science fiction gets it right, man, it's incredible. It's like reading about magic, because who would have thought that the Dynabook would be fully realized, or that Star Trek style communicators would be fully realized, or that the tricorder is essentially a thing.
Yeah.
We have handheld scanning devices now.
Mm-hmm.
Holy crap. We have stem cells that can do all sorts of cool stuff. So we've got this incredible future of medicine that's on the horizon. And so much of that stuff was right. They got it right.
And then I wonder how much of that is
Just
chicken
dumb
and
luck.
egg. Well, not dumb luck so much as how many people in science tried to build a tricorder because they saw it as a kid.
I wonder how many things just happened because of necessity, though.
Right. Well, I mean, in the sense of, okay, you're a kid that is 10 years old when Star Trek comes out. Well, you see a tricorder and you go into medicine, and eventually you're like, I want to build that thing I saw as a kid.
Yeah.
Which it's like, how much of that is like the science fiction driving the generation of creators and engineers to build the things that they saw, which again, that's like...
I'm sure that if you were to poll the great engineers of, going back to, hundreds of years to the beginning of, the age of the dynamo,
Mm-hmm.
we go back to the beginning of the modern machine and all that good stuff, I'm sure that every single one of them would say that some science fiction author was like a great inspiration to them to explore, the sciences. I think that literature, media in general, is the greatest mechanism vector for people to gain interest in a field of study that would truly enriches. And without like proper mechanisms like literature or music, and then the support systems that have to exist, like bookstores or music stores or paint supply stores or just supply stores in general. Like, I feel like home repair supply shops, like whatever, Lowe's or Menards, those places exist for a very good reason. It's because they supply us with materials that we need, and without those things, it makes it difficult for growth to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can only imagine how much more expensive it is to build a house out in the country if you have to supply the truck and trailer to transport the material from the hardware store an hour away.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah. I mean...
You have to own a truck and a trailer.
Yeah.
Capable of hauling a bunch of material. Ugh. And then you have to transport all of that machinery.
Which, again, I think this is where...
I think it's a nice fantasy that people can just, like, uproot and go build a house out in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
I feel like that costs like $1 million every time I turn on the TV and see it. Or I see it on like a HGTV.
Well, and this is where you see on the highways these houses being pre-built and driven there because it's cheaper to do that way.
Oh, yeah. I remember before I bought my house, I looked at modular homes, delivered and assembled. And for like $40,000, I could get a modern modular home that had similar square footage to this building. And but then there was like $10,000 transportation fee or something like that. And then I had to buy the land, and I had to make sure the land was prepared for this thing. So there was an additional like fee and cost of the land, all this other stuff, and it ends up being like way more expensive than you think when you just start out and you see that $35,000 price tag for a building.
Right.
A complete building.
Yeah.
I mean, you have to rent a crane. Man, I want a reason to have a crane. Yeah, it's a level of planning that I'm glad that people specialize in that stuff.
Yeah. Which, I think if you look at city planning, it seems like one of the problems that comes with politics is the people who are the specialists are not the ones making the decisions. So you have a bunch of people who are like mayors and governors or whatever, Congress people, making decisions about city planning, and they know nothing about engineering.
And worse than that, I think the specialists don't even live in the places that they're making.
Yeah.
They're, providing their specialized, informed consult on.
And this is one of the problems you see with like the infrastructure. So the highways and the highway projects that even, Indiana, for example, one of they're doing major, it's been going on for years now, the major construction of I-69 and moving of 67 and also 37.
Oh yeah, bringing 37 up to compliance so that it can be a federal interstate instead of just a state highway.
Exactly. So that's in the process,
all sorts of
the quote unquote specialists that they hired to do this were not familiar with the terrain and the territory because they're not from here.
Yeah.
Now they're over budget. They're
years past
the deadline.
Oh man.
And then all of the people in the local economies have to suffer because of it, and not in just the fact that we have to deal with traffic. It's stress on daily life. It restricts movement. It allows people to get fined even more for movement. Speeds are down. Like highways are now 45 miles an hour. That's like that's the lowest highway speed I've ever experienced in my life. That's,
And not just that, but sometimes it comes to a complete standstill.
The fucking Black Panther character can run faster than that. You know what I mean? I know he's a fictional character, but on foot, that fucking character can run faster than our highway is allowed to actually have cars go. That's fucking absurd. It's not like he's running 80, 90 miles an hour. He's running 55 miles an hour, 60 miles an hour. He is running faster than our highways allow cars to go right now.
And not just that, but a portion of this highway is now an interstate.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure interstates mean like 70 miles an hour,
right.
Or 75 miles an hour.
Yeah,
like,
it's supposed to be.
They're supposed to allow for a higher rate of traffic because they're larger roads and they have giant exit and on-ramp and stuff like that. And oh man.
What I'm starting to wonder though is how many of these choke points on cities have been placed around the country, because what I'm seeing is these choke points are kind of being used as a form of revenue collecting. Not kind of. They are absolutely being used as a form of revenue collection, in the sense of perpetual construction allows for higher fines. It allows for more control over people's schedules, because you're not only like increasing the amount of time people are on the roads by increasing traffic, you're then directing where they're going. So you can say, we're stuck in Bloomington, for example. There's only a couple of ways to actually get across town. So most of them are shut down now. So there's one right across town. So if they want to sit there and keep everybody's going to then be in a hurry. So then if you just sit there and give people tickets, because then they're trying to get around all your detours, so then it becomes this crazy like abuse of revenue collection that doesn't allow people to actually get out of that cycle.
There was a Facebook group up until yesterday or 2 days ago. It was archived recently. And they were called Bloomington, Indiana Roads. And they were reporting all the road closures and construction and all that stuff. But the problem was that people would complain about the traffic conditions to this site that was being maintained by civilians. And people thought that it was some city government thing, and they were like trying to be polite, like, hey, we're just people trying to let you know where the road construction is. We don't actually know anybody in civilian government. Sorry, but they got wave after wave of complaints and just people who didn't bother to read the sticky. They didn't want to read. And so it's kind of sad. There was a mechanism where these things were being discussed. Oh, Bruce. Where these things were being discussed, and now it's gone because people complained. They didn't bother to read the rules, and they complained because the rules were being enforced. And it was interesting because the group had been around for a while, and it just deteriorated all recently. That speaks to what you were saying about how there's a psychological control and effect by enforcing. These road construction patterns are going to alter the dynamic of people and how they drive on the roads.
I think he's hungry.
I don't know, but he just puked.
Yeah, that's like bile. Want to stop here?
Yeah. 'Cause that's all I got for this.